Hey, how are you? Welcome to Live from the Archives. We're here at the incredible David Bieber Archives. David Bieber himself. Welcome, thank you.
Thank you.
The David Bieber Archives is just an absolutely incredible space of memorabilia and artifacts from Boston and beyond, rock, music, hip hop, everything history. Learn more about it at davidbieberarchives.com. Special thanks to Motherlode.tv, which is an online curated archive and a multimedia portal, which is a partner of the archives here. And I'm super excited to get to this panel that we have here of some people that are really will have a lot to say about this sort of project. Myself, I'm Dave Wedge. I write for Vice. I'm an author. I've written a couple of books, one about the Boston Marathon bombings and one about the young man who started the Ice Bucket Challenge, Pete Frates. And I was a journalist at the Boston Herald for 14 years, covered a lot of rock and hip hop and electronic and metal over the years, written for Revolver and Dig Boston and the Herald, obviously. So that's my story. Now let's get to you guys. So Ralph Jaccodine.
So this is like a book panel. I like that.
So have you written a book yet?
No,
you gotta go. You gotta go.
I put
It's
out
an intervention to get you to write a book.
I put out Madonna's sex book. No. I put out a book called Deep Community. It's by an author named Scott Alaric, and he was the folk acoustic Americana guy at the Globe for years and years and years.
Cool.
So we got his collected writings, put them together with a great photographer, and that came out a couple of years ago. And the first time I went to your house, I saw it on a bookshelf. So it made the Bieber Archives. It made the Bieber Archives.
And he still does a great show on WUMB.
Yeah,
Hourly show.
He's so smart.
And I'm so happy that they not only air it at noon on Saturdays, but they play it on the overnight, which is my prime time, during the course of a week.
Yeah.
And he takes a single focused subject. It could be something as, quote, obscure as Utah Phillips, and he'll give it an hour treatment. It's a great show.
It's fascinating. Scott is an incredible guy.
Yeah.
Really, really smart, and the last guy arrested for avoiding the Vietnam War.
Is that right?
He
Really?
was the last guy.
Wow.
Anyway, I'm a manager of musicians.
Yeah, and
So for
you teach at Berklee as well.
26 years I've been managing artists, songwriters, bands. And then about 5 years ago I started teaching music business at Berklee.
Nice.
So I'm full-time at Berklee in the music business management department.
Cool. And some of the artists you've managed, you mentioned
I
Livingston Taylor.
Started out with, I manage Livingston Taylor now. I started out with a guy named Ellis Paul, who's a singer-songwriter, and then a guy named Martin Sexton, the Push Stars, they're on Capitol Records, and Adam Ezra, Johnny A. I have this guy named Shunning from Singapore, and he has a duo with Magic Dick from the Jay Giles Band. And Flynn, who used to be in the Cliffs of Dunedin, and lots of others.
So when you walked in here for your first time and you saw this facility, what did you think?
I just wanted to spend more time here, and I'm just seeing the first Boston Music Award show I went to, the poster's right there, and I got to meet these people and see Aerosmith and Extreme and Bobby Brown and all these people. And
Bobby Brown showed up?
I partied with him all night long.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, that's how he goes. No, I didn't. But I'm looking around, and there's little bits of my life and my career and my passions everywhere.
That's awesome.
It's really good to be here. This is a magical place.
How do you know David?
David, I don't know who he is. Who is he? Oh, David. No, David, I love David.
Yeah.
He's a gentleman. He's intelligent. He's cool. He goes out and sees more art and culture than anybody I've ever met. He is the epicenter of the Boston art, culture, music scene, as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know how we met. Probably at a show somewhere.
Yeah, probably either that or maybe it was with one of the bands that you were working with and one of the radio stations that I was affiliated with, and
Right.
one hand washing the other.
Let's just say yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, one thing I've been learning from doing these little panels is just how small of a universe the Boston music scene can be. Everyone knows someone that knows someone that knows someone, but it's also it's global. You know, the Boston music scene, I think, is very underrated globally, and I'm learning today that there's just so much talent that's come through this city over the years.
And as I'm concerned, like people like David, they help each other out. And it's a scene that helps each other out. When I wanted to be a manager, I never met a manager in my life, but I wanted to help this artist. So, and I was selling real estate. I was in commercial real estate. I had no idea what a manager does. So I heard that a guy named Tim Collins managed Aerosmith, and he lives in Boston. And I actually called him up and made an appointment and got an appointment. And I just want to shake his hand. And he became my mentor and my friend.
And the guy's managing Aerosmith.
But
might have been the hardest job in rock at that point.
Yeah, yeah. And he wanted to help me.
Yeah.
And I said, why don't we get managers together and help each other out? And he goes, let's do that. So we started this Boston Managers Group, and no one knew me, but everybody knew Tim.
Yeah.
So right now, we've been going for 25 years, and we have 115 people in this Boston Managers Group.
That's great.
But it started because the Aerosmith manager wanted to help a young guy who just had a tail wagon but no experience. You know?
That's great. Okay. So let me bring in our other guests. We got my good friend here, the Prime Minister Pete Nice.
What's up, Dave?
So I'll give the quick bio on Pete. So Pete is Pete Nash. He was 1/3 of the fantastic 80s, 90s hip hop group Third
As
Base.
you said in Esquire, the most dysfunctional group in hip hop, right?
That's right. Yeah, I did a piece a couple years ago on Third Base for Esquire magazine, and they were kind of going to do a reunion, but then it's apparently fallen apart. So maybe that'll happen.
As you predicted.
Maybe it'll happen next
It's
decade. But
definitely not happening.
But Pete, in addition to your music, you're an archivist yourself. I mean, you've got an incredible baseball memorabilia collection. You wrote a book about the Royal Rooters, which was the Red Sox famous first fan club. So, what brings you here to this table right
This
now?
guy, Brian Coleman, he interviewed me for one of his hip hop books on the liner notes. Which edition was it?
That was Check the Second.
Check the-
Brian Coleman, journalist, author. Brian and I go way back as well.
And actually, he got me into just looking into, my own storage and boxes, and finding flyers from us, KMD, other early Def Jam stuff, and even stuff going back to Houdini, Run DMC. So he's been telling me about this place for 6 months, maybe even longer, right?
Yeah.
And saying you're not going to believe this place and the stuff that's in here, and it's just insane. And it's definitely insane.
Thank you.
I'm into early Boston history with the Third Base recreation that we did on Boylston. And I see on the wall back there, there's a portrait of Mayor Curley. We got that same one signed by Curley, but it's just like you pick out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like I'm just out of the corner of my eye, look at this sign, that Copley sign you have out there. It's like this place is nuts.
Yeah. So
and that's the beauty.
You getting help? You getting help?
When it connects.
Do you see somebody? I thought I was
Twice a week. Twice a week. Right?
David, we love you. That's why we're here.
I don't get 50-minute hours. I get 70-minute hours. Right? That's how bad my case is.
So Pete also, in addition to his music and his Red Sox stuff, he's one of the owners of McGreevy's bar on Boylston Street, which is in itself kind of a living museum of Red Sox and political history in Boston. And David, right around the corner is the Verb Hotel, which is the only place you can see some of the artifacts from this facility here. So why don't you tell us a little about what people can see at the Verb?
And it's the same as what everyone here does. We try and present authenticity. The real deal items. We don't go in for repros, and it's meant to be a pop cultural moment that existed in time, and for the most part, people discarded, didn't save. The Verb Hotel was created out of the bones of a Howard Johnson's Motor Inn in a neighborhood, the Fenway, that is blotting out the sky and going totally vertical. And this is a 2-story, 93-room hotel that was originally put up in 1959. And the developer of many of the buildings in the Fenway said, no, let's not knock this down and put up a generic 8-story. Let's do something that celebrates Boston music, Boston media, Boston pop culture, and let's have so many things on a rotating basis, whatever you can provide, whatever you think really tells that story. All generations, 50s, 60s into the present, and the idea is to let people know what was going on and how the torch was passed from one group of people to another group of people. And it embraces everything from, Mass Ave, R&B clubs from the 70s to around the corner events that took place on Lansdowne Street. It tells the story of what happened in the Boston music community.
Cool. And when they're ready to do a hip hop room, the man that
Yeah.
I think should curate it, my friend here, Brian Coleman. Brian, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And you're a journalist. You're a bit of a historian yourself. You've written a couple of books about hip hop.
Yep.
What brings you here today?
I'm here as often as I can come in without
Looking
to break in and
Looking for your
Always
next book.
welcome.
Yeah.
Always
Looking for your next book.
Yeah, actually I am. But so I've been a historian. I kind of collect oral histories, I guess, with my journalism is what I've specialized in with hip hop, including people like Pete. The most recent book I did as a pretty in-depth chapter about third base.
What's the
And-
name of that book, Brian?
Check the Technique, Volume
Technique,
2,
cool.
and obviously there's a Volume 1 as well. So what I do with the books is I basically go back with artists and let them, in their own words, tell the stories of their early years and their earlier albums. There are a lot of books out there. I started doing these about 12 years ago, and there weren't as many kind of hip-hop and even general music books. I never liked the ones that were a writer or an academic saying, here's what I want to tell you about an artist. Because I don't care. I really don't care what, unless it's a good friend of mine and we can have a debate. I want to know what the artists have to say, and I want to know their stories because a lot of times, I think hip hop is worse than most art forms, but it's not unique in that it's such a quick kind of thing, and Pete can certainly relate to this, that you do the album, it's crazy, and you get it done. The first thing you do is not, oh, what's the packaging going to look like? And are we going to do a nice liner notes kind of thing? And it's like, get this out on the street now. There's no time to waste because hip hop is such a bam, 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 what's hot now kind of art form. So I grew up in the punk world as a punk fan, going to concerts in New Jersey, central New Jersey in the mid '80s. So I kind of came out of that, and when hip hop came along, I was always it was kind of just punk in like a different way to me. And so I've always been interested in artists, how they create, what they create, and what that process is and what it means to them. So kind of bringing it a little bit towards the archive here and archives in general, the most recent book I did, I included about 350 images. So
Wow.
those were promotional advertisements, photos, pictures of 12-inch singles and things like that I collected. Pete was amazing.
I dug like
helping me out.
studio receipts, all sorts of crazy
Yeah,
stuff.
there I think for you
They
guys,
get-
Yeah, like it was just
You
stuck
guys
in
renting your-
boxes.
They
Well,
gave
that's
receipts.
cool.
Wasn't that all cash back then?
Kept the receipt though, yeah, they gave it to me, man.
They gave you a
Oh,
receipt
yeah,
for cash, yeah?
Funky Slice Recordings at Albee Square
Yeah.
Mall,
Yeah.
Brooklyn, yeah.
No kidding, huh?
he's got the receipt. It's in the book.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
But I think that things like that add so much to the visual, not just the visual element of breaking up text. My books are like 500 pages long. They're kind of crazy. But it's important to me to show these documents and what they mean, what they meant at the time, kind of how they fit into the story. So having something like that receipt, I think if anything, it kind of humanizes. I personally think the reason I like the books and I'm happy with the way they've turned out is there's always this view of artists, especially if it's an artist that you grew up idolizing or worshiping, and you think that they're perfect and they never have a bad day or get a flat tire or, oh, that album must have been really easy to record. And that's almost never the case. There's always stuff that goes on. There's always little kind of roadblocks and speed bumps as you go along. And to me, what's always been interesting is how artists deal with adversity and deal with things that come up and kind of on the fly, whether it's rock or country music or hip hop, and be creative, and actually can sometimes take something that seems devastating and turn it into something even better. So anyway, the archive itself, I love being here because for anything you can kind of pick up, I might know a little bit about something, but maybe I know 10% of it. So I'll pick up something and it says, it's a Rat flyer from the late 70s, like from the Inflictors or something like that. And I'll kind of look at it and say, okay, I kind of know what this is about. I was 6 years old at the time of the show, so obviously I wasn't there. But for me personally, and I'm not alone, and I think everyone here would be the same way, is it makes me want to know more.
Yeah.
And it's so amazing to have David and Chuck and Lance in here to be able to say, tell me, this is your flyer. You went to the show. Tell me, what was the Rat like? I know what the Rat was like in the late 80s, but what was it like in the 70s, et cetera, et cetera. So there's multiple levels to it, but a lot of it is to have someone who can contextualize it for you makes it so much more powerful. And then honestly, depending on what your own avenue is, whether you're doing books or a podcast or a writer, whatever, you can then take that and get that out to the world too. So it kind of is a ripple effect.
So one thing we've been talking about a lot while we're going through this, thinking about this archive is what you're talking about with the receipt and the flyers, like that makes it real. And like those aren't online. You can't find those flyers and that receipt on Google. And a lot of the generation behind us is, if it's not on Google, it doesn't exist. But this is proof that things exist beyond Google.
Or Wikipedia. Or something
exactly,
like that.
and this stuff is here, and it's being preserved, and it's living history. And I mean,
they're one of a kind items too, in many cases, and you can almost feel the DNA of whoever was involved in the transaction, who touched the poster, the flyer, the receipt. I mean, all these things contextualize the words. They really give a kind of complimentary version, of what happened. And I think that the more people who see things and realize that there is a tangible living history, they become increasingly curious. They want more.
Right.
I think they just need the stimulus to begin the process of understanding what all this content means.
But you're also collecting people.
Yeah.
I've met a lot of interesting people that
yeah.
are your friends or around you, and this shows another idea. Like I've been watching the show, and these stories that come out are incredible.
Yeah.
And that's part of being an archivist is listening to the stories and meeting the people.
Yeah. And I think that this is kind of a very circumstantial grouping of people. The fact that you two walked in, I mean, I'm delighted you're here, but this was not part of the plan, but you can be injected perfectly, and what you bring, it's that butterfly effect of, you change the dynamic, but for improving it.
Well, but let's be honest, like there's so much stuff here that there's something for everyone, it's not like if you just collected stamps, then I would kind of be like, okay, we wouldn't have that much to talk about. Because my own ignorance.
I did see a box that had a box of stamp catalogs, maybe all stamp auction catalogs.
With that, David, you've got a
Of course he has.
Let's show that.
He has them on his person, of course.
What are these? These are some
notice the
some
lack
Russian
of look of
stamps.
surprise
Is that
on
what
my
they are?
face.
The fact that you're not
You
surprised.
have to go to the post office later? Or?
David, we have a box with some artifacts you want to.
Wait, no. Why do you have that? Why is that in your pocket?
That's
I wanna
weird.
know.
Because I was at an event yesterday, an exhibit for the Plymouth Rocks Film Festival. Chachi Lopret was spinning Beatles records at this benefit, and he and I, even though he grew up in Boston, I grew up in Cleveland, we always joked about this company, H.E. Harris, that was out of Boston. I saw him last night. He said, I have a present for you. Here they are. These are the
Wow.
stamps, so.
I was wondering how I was going to connect that since they're Russian stamps.
Yeah,
I was
no,
like,
I'm not
I
running.
have no idea where that
Coincidence?
Where's that
The
going?
previous segment, we were talking about the Russian Revolution, so.
Sure.
It's
Nothing-
it's been
nothing
all over.
shocks me.
But I know that Ralph and I have been friends for a long time. And, you know, he has told me about the meticulous journals that he keeps on his life. And how many are you up to at this point?
I have 45 years every day.
Every day.
One
right?
page.
Okay.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
So with that in mind,
But I'm not crazy. I'm not this crazy. Like that. You know, when I say it, it sounds crazy, but this is crazy. This is crazy.
So he's got 45 years of his life, and I've got 50 years of copies of Billboard magazine. You know, so but I think that I bow down to that as an endeavor. And I just thought, with Ralph being here, I have a box of things that I haven't looked at that came from Cleveland that are probably 50, 60 years old. And I just thought bring a couple
Sure.
of those items out. These were action figures from James Bond movies
Wow.
in the box.
Let me see. This is like
$2.99.
Steve Carell and
Goldfinger.
40-year-old virgin sort of stuff.
$2.99.
Do you know what it takes to keep that in the box for a little kid?
It takes a very frustrated child.
Can I open it?
Oh yeah, please. And you can also see the beauty of the
Is
box.
that Steve Austin's boss?
You're setting yourself up for a disappointment when it comes to the real deal, the toy.
This is a good one.
I mean, look at the difference. Odd job here as opposed to
What is
odd
he, in a
job
hospital room?
This guy looks like Freddie Mercury. Doesn't he? It's a fat Freddie Mercury.
What is he wearing?
He's wearing something Freddie Mercury would have worn to the sauna.
Wow, David, that's
He's got a little
amazing.
bowler cap down there too.
Yeah.
And this is funny.
Crazy.
Okay,
Here we go.
Here you go.
Stamp collector's book.
I have not seen this. We did not plan. No, nobody planted stamps in my pocket. But this is the exact
What year is
company,
that?
H.E. Harris.
So I was a stamp collector as a little boy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my father
1955
was,
edition.
yeah.
1955.
Wow.
And one of my sister's dolls that
That's haunted?
and
It's actually
she
in pretty good shape.
Oh, it's got the
chides
tag.
me for the fact that I am looking at this box for the first time right now.
Oh,
This
she-
box
oh,
has
that-
been available to me for probably the last year. She would have been all over this box within the first 12 minutes that it landed here. You know, and so
Oh yeah, United Nations edition. It's got some
and this is where I grew
celebrity
up.
dolls too.
Cleveland Heights.
Yeah, creepy doll. Check it
That
out.
is creepy as hell.
Yeah,
What
that's
year
creepy.
The high school.
You can always tell
on.
what year something was if there's an absence of an area code
that's
or
true.
if
Yeah.
they still use a zone as opposed to a zip code.
That's some creepy stuff right there.
Yeah, you can have a creepy baby back.
This, a random
Oh, wow,
shoe
this
that
is-
probably was a planter.
Yeah, it is a little dirty.
Like, this is probably high school, right?
Yeah, is this your like high school?
Yeah.
Cleveland Heights.
Were you in the lineup?
No,
What were you like in
I
high
was
school?
not even on the sidelines.
What were you like in high school?
I couldn't wait to get out.
Were you in a club or?
I was the kind of person that would want to listen to the R&B formatted radio station, and my friends would want to listen to the top 40. They'd want to throw me out of the car, you know. And I tried to control the push buttons of the dial, and I was so eager to be gone from Cleveland,
Yeah.
and led me to Boston to go to school, and just been
Yeah.
no looking back ever since. And even this has a stamps theme.
There you go.
I don't want
It's getting a little weird.
This is,
now.
yeah, this is
It's
getting
getting
weird.
weird. You have a little bit of
Yeah.
a stamp. You had
But
to
I
bring
mean,
up the
look at the-
stamps, Brian, didn't you?
These are both stamps. David's like a conjurer. He can like produce these kinds of things. That is pretty
That's
strange.
54.
You want weird dolls?
59.
With the eyes?
Wow.
I
That is
think
pretty
I think
What was
for
that
the,
Twilight Zone talking
for,
Tina?
for the
I'm
for the
talking
economy
Tina,
of
wanna kill you.
space, we didn't keep the bodies.
I'm talking Tina, I want to
Yeah.
I remember
lights,
that one.
Yeah. That's
Creepy.
Yeah.
That's
kill you.
not.
No, this is kind of creepy too.
And if
not-
you move it, the eyes go up and down.
Dude, oh, they close. They
Yeah, check
close.
this
Good
one
night.
out.
Is that a baby?
Yeah, I don't want to.
Baby shoe with
Get a close up of that
seashells.
one.
So this is perhaps as far as we want to go, but it shows you
So-
the diversity of what I collected at probably age 7, 8, 9, 10.
So where'd you keep this? In your house, in the basement?
Basement and attic, and the problem was that my mother had a line of demarcation that if something was put in the attic, it had some kind of lasting importance, and it always stayed in the attic. If things were in the basement, within a year or two, she tossed it. And that's where the baseball cards were, and that's where the comic books were. But I do, somewhere in these boxes, I have my father's army uniform and all the papers that they saved
Wow.
from the 1940s.
Should be easy to find.
But but the first time I came here, you have false teeth or something. You had a whole
Oh, yeah, that's,
collection
I
of
remember
false teeth.
Can I walk and go get?
Yeah. That's,
So while David's
Yes.
gone, Pete, we'll bring you back in. So, you're a New Yorker, and a lot of the stuff here is Boston music scene centric. What do you know about the history of the Boston music scene?
Well, I mean, just from performing in Boston when we did like the Rat and we performed at the Channel, so like just learning like all the groups that played at these spots that we would open up for like Big Audio Dynamite at the Channel.
I was
and
there. Is that
Really?
when they had the mace?
I think so. I know that we offended the entire crowd with some routines that we
as
would
well you
use like
should.
in Brooklyn, and it was in the Globe, and I won't repeat what it was because nowadays we would be like crucified. But yeah, so we really shook things up. But like, I've always had an appreciation for history of places, and even through sports, like obviously Red Sox
Yep.
history, and hip hop really was 100% born in New York. But guys, like Bill Adler was my publicist for Def Jam, and he was from Boston and originally worked at the stations in Boston. He was the one who was playing Curtis Blow's Christmas Rappin' into like Easter time and even past Easter
Yeah.
time because it was such a hot record. So I learned a lot how Boston figured even into early hip hop through Bill.
Yeah.
So that he was kind of like my in on knowing that Boston was tied to hip hop.
So
in those
third
early days.
third base played at the Rat.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
never heard
yeah.
that.
I didn't
remember
know
at
that.
all.
Yeah,
Wow.
I remember getting off the tour bus. It was so small. It was like we went from playing like some Coliseum to like playing this little joint.
Welcome to Boston.
Yeah,
Play in the basement.
Exactly.
Yeah, rap wasn't huge in Boston then.
Well, like Edo G and the Bulldogs, like
Yeah.
that, like right around like
What year
90,
is this?
88, 89, 90. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, I'm an old timer now. It's like you think about it, it's like
30 years ago.
Before you were probably at the Herald, but that's where Bill Adler was writing as well.
Yeah, Bill Adler was
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
my time, but
Yep.
yeah.
He wrote for the Phoenix, he wrote for the Herald, and then he went to New York. Yeah.
And then Bill, like the first thing, he wrote the article in People magazine about the disco fever up in the Bronx, and that actually got him together with Russell, who, I mean, Bill
Russell Simmons.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Bill put up with so much stuff
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Russell, like Bill requested just like a file cabinet, or like an extra space in the office, and they turned him down because his budget was like $300. Meanwhile, making money hand over fist at the
Yeah.
You
place.
see, we should just stop and do a couple hours of your stories.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing.
Well, but the way that he's archiving
Yeah,
everything
Bill's
here,
got an
like
amazing archive.
some people have started to archive all the hip hop history, and what's sad is like guys like Russell, Lior, even like Jay-Z and these guys have contributed like not one dime to like the preservation of like hip hop culture. So there's like it's left up like the Cornell hip hop collection is like the main holding of
Yeah.
flyers, music, all the original recordings from Africa Bambaataa, Zulu Nation.
How
And,
about
like,
the Harvard archives? Don't they?
It's a smaller archive. They don't have as much material, but I guess they have a little bit of a budget. So
Wow.
I think I'm not sure what in particular. Like Cornell just has like Grandmaster
Harvard
Caz's
doesn't
rhyme
even
books.
come
Yeah, it's
close.
like
Yeah.
Wow.
it's like insane, and even just the flyer collection from Buddy Esquire. I mean, they have about close to like 800, 900 flyers going back to the earliest days, like 76, 77.
Have you contributed any items to the Cornell one?
Uh,
I know you were on the board for a while.
No, I'm just like a friend of the place and help them out with different. Like I was on a panel with Stretch and
That's right.
Bobbito's
Yeah,
movie,
yeah.
but I actually have hooked them up with some people who I know who have other collections. And at some point, I found like important tapes or documents and stuff that I'd like them to end up with. So
You know, what's one
Hopefully.
interesting thing about talking about an archive is that, like, so I've been to the Bill Adler collection at Cornell and looked through it, and one thing you can kind of get from that, I'll just give one quick example, is you could tell, I don't know if you noticed this, you probably did, but at some point, Bill, after every conversation he would have with Russell Simmons, would write a memo. Because I think at some point, I think you could probably relate that Russell would remember things differently than what happened in the meeting about your budget for the tour or something like that. So he would, I noticed in looking through his archive, it'd be like, "Dear Russell, thanks for meeting today. As we discussed, this is this."
So that's where James Comey got his thing from. I like
and
that.
he would
So it goes back to
PR
hip hop.
Right.
I'm sure it goes back further than that, but I found that interesting. Like, and that's the kind of thing you would never know.
Yeah.
But having access to that, it could just gives an extra understanding of the dynamic of Def Jam.
And now everything is digital, so even with him, he like printed out his email. So like I found like one email in there was like, it's like, "Russ, Curtis blows on my ass. He's going off on you, how you ripped him off and this and that. And he wants some money. How do you deal with these situations?" And Russell's like answers one word, "Whatever." And then under it, it has some like yoga, like, you know, "Happiness is forever," you know, like something like that. It's like, you know, Russ. And then there was another one for like MTV was doing a documentary on the drug years, or like I think it was VH1, and the producer was sending an email to Bill, and it was like, "Bill, yo, your boy Russ was good in the interview, but like after the interview," and he's talking about repealing the Rockefeller drug laws, but after, you know, on the set, after we, you know, said cut, he's talking about his love of PCP to this day, you know, so it's like, but like you could only find that like on, and it's good that Bill actually didn't redact things and cut things back, so.
I'm sure
Well,
Russell will
we-
thank you for that later.
Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap up, but
Gotta show the teeth.
we got to show the teeth.
Yeah,
Yes, we gotta-
very quickly, I will say that I'm not a dumpster diver, but I do on trash night in West Roxbury notice things that are leaping from the curb and that force me to stop and examine. And this is a salesman's sample as
Of false teeth?
Of false teeth from the 1940s. And I don't know if you want to do a close-up or not. It's
No.
a full set.
They look
full
pretty
set.
nice.
Yeah.
Class 2 and Class 3.
Get this creepy thing away from me.
Yeah, let's put
Yeah,
this creepy
this
thing
is
up.
crazy.
Put that
Rock
creepy
creepy
thing up.
things.
And now this creepy
Yeah,
thing.
right.
Ashley's looking at me.
Who needs teeth?
Yeah, how creepy can we get? You know, bring on the Tyler man again.
Pete, we should turn these. We should turn these into gold fronts.
Yeah, you could, or if you're a rapper today, you could just make them red, white, and
Right.
purple
That's
or
right,
whatever,
right,
like
right,
this
yeah.
boy- who's that kid?
So these are the fruits
Lil
of
Xan.
someone's basement toss within the last year.
Well, this is about the craziest thing I've ever held in my hand. So,
Well, at least they're not
You wanna
real
go
teeth.
wash
That
your
would be
hands
that would be crazier.
but no, thank you all, Ralph. Thank you for being here and sharing with us some of your stories, Pete. Always a
problem.
pleasure, my friend. And
Good seeing you.
Brian Coleman. Any new books?
I'm actually working on one that will feature a lot of stuff from this archive that will be out
Great.
sometime this summer. So
And Pete, you've got a couple books you're
Got a-
working on.
One book coming out on like pictorial history of the golden era of hip hop, and then a book on the history of flyers, like the hip
These
hop
gonna be
flyers.
coffee table books.
Yeah,
Kinda?
but by the artist, Phase 2 was like the most prolific flyer
Amazing.
artist in the history of hip hop.
Cool. Well, you guys, great to have you all here. David, we love your facility here. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
Crazy.
Go take care of those teeth. I think they need to be brushed.
You take care of the doll's head.
Now wait, where's your collection of toothbrushes?
Well, thank you all for joining us here at the live at the archive from the David Bieber Archives. If you want to learn more, visit davidbieberarchives.com. Thanks to the Norwood Space Center, the space that we're in right here. Music Drives Us, which is the foundation that helps support this whole effort. Motherload.tv, and also, of course, MediaBoss. So thank you all for being here, and
Thanks.
thanks.